I wanted to put this frame on here just to see, just to make sure it was all good before I built this base. And then I thought, well, there's something that might be of interest to you. It'll save you a big headache and a lot of wasted material. You always have to keep in mind the width of your board, the thickness. The length doesn't matter. In this case, I'm using 1 1/4 inch thick, and then it's 3 inches in width. Now, when I do that, the hole, the pocket hole, when you use your guide, and I'll demonstrate here, it starts way back here to drill that hole in. Now, let's say I would have thought, okay, I want this to be 2 1/2 inches in width. And I cut it all 2 1/2 inches and planed it, went through all the trouble. And if I would have done that, I don't know if you can see here, but 2 1/2 inches, the hole would have started up here on the edge, and I wouldn't have been able to hide the hole. So I would have wasted all this wood, all this old wood. And so I'm going to go over here and bring you over and cut some holes and show you what I'm talking about. Now, I guess before we get into it, I want to show you something else. And I'm going to just go ahead and zoom it in so you can see it, bring it in close. See where this bit is? When you put your bit in here, and then you have this collar that you adjust. You want to make sure, in this case, I'm still set on 1 1/4 on this guide over here. But see where the end of my bit is? You don't want that bit sitting on that blue platform. In fact, I would say that in drilling all these holes, that bit, this collar has possibly slipped up. So I'm going to loosen up that collar, and I want that bit, tip of that bit, to be about 1/4 inch off of that platform. Just guessing. That way your screws will not go through what you're working on. So it's 1/4 inch off of there. And that's where I like it. I don't have my shop vac hooked up because I want to talk to you while I'm doing this. But I'm going to drill one here. And this guide is set at 1 1/4 inches. That's about what I've been working with on this coffee table, or on this dining room table. You see how far back that's started? Now take a look at this. The frame I've got around the bottom side of that dining room table is 3 inches. If I would have cut all my wood to 2 1/2 inches, that hole would have started outside the width of my wood, and I couldn't have covered up that hole. Keep that in mind. So I'm gonna go on down and just drill a series of holes here, so that I'll just stair step them so you can see what I'm talking about. So I've cut a series of holes, 1.5 inches, 1 1/4 inches, 1 inch, and 1/2 inch, and that was a flub. I forgot to set the depth of my bit. So if this width was 1.5 inches, see where this hole's going to start? 1 1/4 inches, what I've been working with on this dining room table, that's where my hole starts. If you're working with 1 inch, that's where your hole starts. And then 1/2 inch, that's where the hole starts. So take a look at this. If If you don't plan this all out and know this bit of information, it could really cost you in material and time. What I'm working with for the framework around that dining room table is 1.25 inch thickness, 3-inch width. Now let's say I ripped all that wood, because I'm going to make it 2.5 inches, and I got it all ripped and planed off and ready to go, and look where my 2.5 inches would have fell. Right there. So the hole would have started in the top edge of the board, which would have looked terrible, and I would have had to have redone it. Look here. If I would have been, if you're working with 1.5 inch wood, you don't want that width to be less than 3.5 inches. If you're working with 1-inch wood, 2.5 is barely, I'd go over 2. You probably would want your width to be, you could get by with 2 5/8. And then if your wood is, if your thickness is 1 inch, then the width of your board is probably going to have to be 1 7/8 minimum. Otherwise, the top of these holes is going to hit on the width of your board up here at the top, where you can't cover it and fix the problem. So this is something you really have to keep in mind when you plan out a project. So anyway, hope you learned something from this, and let's start building a base on this tabletop.